Have you ever had a moment where you knew you were capable of more, but a voice inside whispered, "What if I'm not good enough?" That quiet voice, that subtle hesitation, is self-doubt. And today, we're not just going to silence it. We're going to understand it, because the truth is, you can't overcome what you refuse to face. I've met leaders, artists, and entrepreneurs, people who've built extraordinary things, and every single one of them has at some point questioned their worth. So if you've ever felt insecure or uncertain about yourself, you're not broken, you're human. Self-doubt isn't a flaw, it's a signal. It's our brain's way of asking, do I have what it takes? But here's the shift: instead of letting that question paralyze us, we can let it guide us. Because the only way to find out is to act. Self-doubt is something that creeps in quietly. It doesn't arrive with a loud announcement or a dramatic entrance. It whispers. It shows up right before you send that message, right before you walk on stage, right before you share your idea. And suddenly, that small voice in your mind begins to question. Am I really good enough? What if they don't like it? What if I fail? The reason we struggle to overcome self-doubt is because most of us try to fight it without ever understanding where it comes from. We see doubt as the enemy, when in reality, it's a messenger. The question is not, how do I silence it? The real question is, why is it speaking in the first place? When Simon Sinek talks about starting with why, he's not just talking about companies or leaders. He's talking about human behavior. Everything we do, every thought we have begins with a reason. And the same applies to self-doubt. It doesn't appear out of nowhere, it has a purpose. It's often our mind's way of protecting us from pain, embarrassment, or rejection. It's the brain's attempt to keep us safe in the familiar, even if the familiar isn't fulfilling. Think about it this way: when you were a child, you didn't doubt yourself much, you didn't hesitate to draw a picture, sing out loud, or share an idea. You were free because you hadn't yet learned to fear judgment. But as we grow, experiences start to shape how we see ourselves. A teacher's harsh comment, a friend's laughter, a failure we never forgot. Each moment plants a seed. Over time, those seeds grow into stories we tell ourselves. I'm not creative. I'm not smart enough. I always mess things up. And those stories become powerful. They form our inner dialogue, and soon we begin to believe them as truth. That's how self-doubt roots itself deeply, not in reality, but in the interpretation of our experiences. It's not the event that defines our confidence. It's the meaning we attach to it. Understanding the root of self-doubt means peeling back the layers. It means asking, where did I learn to doubt myself? Whose voice am I really hearing when I say I'm not enough? Sometimes it's not even your voice. It's the echo of someone else's limitations projected onto you. Recognizing that truth can be liberating because it allows you to separate who you are from what you've been told. The irony is that doubt often shows up when you're about to grow. It appears right before a big decision, right before a leap. It's almost as if your mind is saying, wet. Are you sure you're ready to leave your comfort zone? That hesitation is not proof of weakness, it's proof of evolution. The presence of doubt doesn't mean you can't do it. It means you're stretching beyond what you've known. We must stop treating self-doubt as a wall and start treating it as a mirror. It reflects what we value most. We don't doubt the things we don't care about. You never doubt whether you can brush your teeth or tie your shoes. You doubt the things that matter to your identity, the things that carry weight. That means self-doubt is not just an obstacle, it's a compass pointing to what truly matters to you. When you feel that familiar tension between who you are and who you want to be, pause and ask yourself why. Why am I feeling this hesitation? Why does this matter to me? What is it that I'm afraid of losing? Often you'll discover that what you're afraid of isn't failure itself. It's the loss of approval, belonging, or control. But once you name that fear, it starts to lose its power. Understanding the root of self-doubt also requires compassion. Too often, we respond to our insecurity with judgment. We scold ourselves for feeling unsure, as if confidence is something we should have mastered by now. But imagine speaking to a friend who is doubting themselves. You wouldn't tell them they're weak, you'd remind them they're human. You'd tell them that doubt doesn't define their ability. It simply means they care deeply about doing it right. That same compassion must be turned inward. Instead of saying, "What's wrong with me for feeling this way?" try saying, "What is my doubt trying to tell me?" Maybe it's telling you that you're stepping into something new, something uncertain, and that's okay. Maybe it's reminding you that growth feels uncomfortable. But discomfort is the birthplace of confidence. The truth is, every person you admire, every confident speaker, every successful leader feels doubt. The difference is not that they don't have it. The difference is that they've learned to understand it, to use it as feedback instead of failure. They start with why. They ask themselves why they're afraid, why they care, and why they're doing it anyway. When you start to understand the why behind your self-doubt, it begins to lose its grip. It stops being a wall that blocks your path and becomes a doorway to awareness. Because when you know your why, Even uncertainty starts to make sense. Fear is one of the most misunderstood emotions we experience. We often treat it as a red light, a signal to stop, retreat, and stay safe. But the truth is, fear was never designed to stop us. It was designed to prepare us. It's a built-in response meant to alert us to risk, not to paralyze us in the face of it. The problem arises when we mistake that signal for a warning that something is wrong, when in reality, it's often a sign that something deeply meaningful is about to happen. When we feel fear, our body reacts, the heart races, palms sweat, thoughts race, and most of us interpret those sensations as danger. But biologically, that same response occurs when we're excited. The difference between fear and excitement is often just interpretation. What we call fear could also be labeled as energy. It's the same adrenaline that makes us hesitate before we take a leap, and the same fuel that pushes us to perform at our best once we do. Simon Sinek often says that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. To reframe fear, we must stop asking, how do I get rid of it? And instead ask, what is it trying to tell me? Fear is data. It's information about what matters most to us. We don't fear what we don't value. You don't fear failing at something you don't care about. You fear it because it means something to your identity, your purpose, or your sense of belonging. Imagine standing on the edge of an opportunity, maybe a job interview, a public speech, or a creative project. That knot in your stomach isn't there to tell you to turn back. It's there to remind you that this matters. It's your body's way of saying, pay attention, be present, this is important. And when you learn to hear that message, instead of resisting it, fear transforms from a barrier into a compass. The challenge is that our minds are wired to avoid discomfort. Thousands of years ago, fear was a survival mechanism. It kept us from walking into dangerous territory or confronting threats that could harm us. But in today's world, those threats are no longer wild animals. They're emotional ones. The fear of rejection, judgment, failure, or inadequacy activates the same instinctive response as a physical threat. Our body prepares to fight, flee, or freeze. But this time, the danger is internal. It's not our surroundings that threaten us, it's our own thoughts. The most successful people are not fearless. They have simply trained themselves to interpret fear differently. They recognize that fear means growth is happening. They know that on the other side of fear is expansion. The moment you feel resistance, the moment you feel your heart race before a big step, that's when you're closest to change. Because growth doesn't happen in comfort zones. Comfort keeps us safe, but it also keeps us the same. To reframe fear as a signal, you must practice awareness. When fear appears, don't immediately react to it. Observe it. Ask questions. What exactly am I afraid of? What's the worst that could happen? And if that happens, could I handle it? Often you'll find that the fear is bigger in your mind than it is in reality. And once you identify it, it loses its mystery. And with it, much of its power. Another shift comes when we start viewing fear not as a threat, but as a teacher. Every fear points to an area where we have room to grow. If you fear public speaking, it's because your voice matters. If you fear failing, it's because success means something to you. If you fear being judged, it's because you care about connection and belonging. These fears highlight our values. They reveal what's sacred to us. And when you see them through that lens, fear becomes a map guiding you toward purpose. The stories we tell ourselves about fear determine how we respond to it. When we say, I'm scared, so I shouldn't, we close the door. But when we say, I'm scared, so this must matter, we open a new one. That shift in mindset changes everything. It turns fear into motivation. It allows us to walk into situations with awareness rather than avoidance. One of the most profound realizations about fear is that it's often temporary, but regret is not. The discomfort of fear fades the moment we take action, yet the pain of inaction lingers for years. Fear wants to protect you from the unknown, but sometimes the unknown is exactly where you need to go. Every time you act despite fear, you retrain your brain. You prove to yourself that fear doesn't control you. It guides you. Reframing fear doesn't mean pretending it's not there. It means respecting it without surrendering to it. It means acknowledging its presence but deciding to move anyway. Courage then is simply the willingness to move one step forward while fear walks beside you. Because fear will always walk with you when you're doing something that matters. The goal isn't to silence it. The goal is to listen differently. Confidence is not something we are born with. It is something we build brick by brick through the promises we keep to ourselves. Most people think confidence is about believing you can do something great, but in truth, it begins much smaller than that. It begins in the quiet moments when no one is watching. The moments where you say you'll do something and then you follow through. Because every time you keep a promise to yourself, you create evidence that you are reliable, and that evidence becomes the foundation of self-trust. Self-doubt often grows in the gap between what we say we'll do and what we actually do. Every time we tell ourselves, I'll start tomorrow, and then we don't, that gap widens. We begin to lose faith in our own word. And once that trust is broken internally, even small challenges start to feel impossible. The mind begins to whisper, you've let yourself down before. What makes this time different? It's not that we lose our ability, we lose our belief in our own consistency. Building confidence then is not about achieving something enormous, it's about rebuilding that trust through small, honest wins. It's about proving to yourself that your words have weight. When you say you'll get up early and you do, that's not just a morning routine, that's a micro moment of integrity. When you say you'll finish that project and you do, that's another brick in your foundation. Over time, these small acts compound into something powerful. You start to realize that confidence doesn't come from external validation, it comes from internal credibility. Sinek often talks about trust in leadership, that people follow leaders not because they're in charge, but because they trust them. The same principle applies internally. You won't follow your own ambitions if you don't trust yourself. And trust isn't built through grand gestures, it's built through consistency. It's the accumulation of small wins that reinforce the belief that when you commit to something, you follow through. Think of it like a relationship. If a friend repeatedly promised to show up but kept canceling last minute, over time you'd stop relying on them. The same dynamic happens within ourselves. When we continually break promises to ourselves, even unintentionally, we begin to doubt our own word. But when we honor even the smallest commitments, finishing a task, staying true to a boundary, choosing honesty over avoidance, we rebuild that relationship. We begin to believe ourselves again. The challenge is that we live in a culture that celebrates big achievements but rarely acknowledges the small, quiet victories that lead to them. We celebrate the finished marathon, not the early mornings of practice. We celebrate the successful business, not the months of discipline behind the scenes. Yet it's those small, often invisible actions that forge the trust necessary to sustain confidence when doubt arises. Every honest win is a message to your subconscious, I can depend on me. And when you start to depend on yourself, something incredible happens. You stop needing constant reassurance from others. You stop chasing validation because you already possess internal proof. You no longer need someone else to tell you that you're capable, because your actions have already shown you that you are. This doesn't mean perfection. Building self-trust isn't about never breaking a promise, it's about learning from it when you do. When you fall short, instead of labeling yourself a failure, pause and ask what happened. Maybe you overcommitted. Maybe you set unrealistic expectations. The goal is not to punish yourself, it's to adjust, realign, and make the next promise one you can actually keep. Integrity grows when your actions and your values are aligned. When you start small, you begin to feel momentum. That's why small, honest wins matter so much. They are achievable and they create a sense of progress. Progress, even tiny progress, is powerful because it rewires the brain to associate effort with reward. Each completed task, each kept promise sends a signal to your mind, I can do hard things. And the more you accumulate those moments, the more resilient you become when self-doubt reappears. There's also an emotional dimension to building trust. It requires authenticity, the courage to be honest with yourself about where you are. You can't build trust on self-deception. Pretending you're okay when you're not, or acting confident while feeling lost, might fool others for a while, but it doesn't build internal credibility. The real confidence comes from saying, I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to try. That honesty, that willingness is the truest form of courage. Confidence is not built overnight. It's earned through repetition and honesty. It's not about telling yourself positive affirmations in the mirror. It's about creating real evidence that supports those affirmations. When your actions reflect your intentions, your words begin to mean something again. And when your words mean something, you begin to stand a little taller, speak a little clearer, and act with more conviction. Small, honest wins have the power to transform the way you see yourself. They anchor you when doubt begins to whisper. They remind you that you are not your fears or your failures. You are the sum of every promise you've kept, every step you've taken, every truth you've chosen to honor. Human beings are wired for connection. From the moment we're born, our sense of safety, belonging, and identity is shaped by the people around us. And whether we realize it or not, the environment we choose or tolerate has a profound influence on our confidence. Self-doubt doesn't just grow from within, it grows in the spaces where we feel unseen, unheard, or unsupported. The right people don't just make us feel good, they help us see ourselves more clearly. Sinek often says that leadership and trust are deeply rooted in relationships. The same truth applies to our own growth. We don't become confident in isolation, we become confident in connection. Think about it, when you're around people who constantly criticize, compare, or minimize your efforts, it becomes harder to believe in yourself. But when you're surrounded by those who remind you of your strengths, challenge you to rise, and celebrate your growth, even your smallest victories begin to feel significant. The circle you keep acts like a mirror. It reflects back who you believe you are. The wrong circle can make you question your worth, even when you're doing everything right. You start to internalize their doubts, their fears, their limitations. If you spend enough time with people who always find reasons why things can't be done, eventually you'll start to see the world through that same lens. The human mind adapts to its environment. It conforms to the emotional tone of the room. That's why it's not enough to simply stay positive. You have to intentionally choose spaces that reinforce the best version of you, not the version that plays small to fit in. Surrounding yourself with the right circle doesn't mean surrounding yourself only with people who agree with you. It means surrounding yourself with people who believe in your potential more than your comfort. The right people don't let you settle for mediocrity. They challenge you, but they do it from a place of care, not competition. They ask questions that make you think deeper, not comments that make you doubt harder. They see the parts of you that you often forget to see. The strength, the creativity, the resilience that self-doubt tries to hide. Confidence thrives in environments of psychological safety. This is a concept Simon Sinek often touches upon in his talks about leadership and trust. Psychological safety means being in a space where you can speak, make mistakes, and be honest without fear of ridicule or rejection. When you're part of a group that allows you to be human, imperfect, learning, evolving, you start to relax into yourself. You stop pretending, and in that authenticity, confidence naturally grows. You don't have to prove your worth because you're reminded that you already have it. But sometimes creating that environment requires letting go. It means distancing yourself from voices that drain you, no matter how familiar they are. It means being honest about the relationships that constantly make you feel small. The difficult truth is that some of the people who love you most might also be the ones who doubt you most. They might not mean harm. They're just projecting their own fears. Still, your growth depends on learning when to listen with empathy and when to protect your peace. Building the right circle is about intentional alignment. It's not about surrounding yourself with perfect people, but with people who share similar values, integrity, growth, empathy, and authenticity. These are the people who don't just celebrate your successes, but who stand beside you in silence when things fall apart. They don't inflate your ego, they strengthen your character. They remind you that your worth isn't conditional on your performance, but rooted in your humanity. The energy of your environment seeps into your mindset when you're around people who dream big, who push through challenges, who speak life instead of limitation. It rewires your perception of what's possible. You begin to mirror that courage. Confidence becomes contagious. We learn how to believe in ourselves by watching others do the same. That's why community is so powerful. It's not just support, it's inspiration in motion. But this is a two-way exchange. Just as the right people lift you, you must also be that person for others. Confidence deepens when you help someone else believe in themselves. When you encourage, uplift, and guide others, you reinforce those same truths within yourself. It becomes a cycle of mutual empowerment, a collective of people who remind each other their potential when doubt tries to take hold. The right circle doesn't just change what you believe about yourself, it changes how you behave. You begin to take bolder steps, speak more authentically, and pursue goals you once thought were out of reach. Because when you know you're supported, when you know someone will be there to catch you if you fall, you start to take the leaps that once terrified you. You realize that courage doesn't mean standing alone, it means standing together, surrounded by people who see the best in you even when you can't. Every great leader, artist, and innovator has had a circle, not of followers, but of believers. People who offered perspective when doubt clouded their vision. People who reminded them of their purpose when the journey felt uncertain. The right circle gives you the courage to step into your potential, not because they hand you confidence, because they help you remember it was always there.